Good morning to some and good afternoon to others. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman, and you're here with Saturday Soul, where we hope that your minds and hearts are changed as we talk about issues that impact the Black community. So, today, the focus of our discussion will be on Black parenting and education. And so while you're here, I would ask you to share uh, if you're on Facebook, if you can share this, start a watch party. If you are on YouTube, please subscribe and also share with your loved ones and friends. Those who are very serious, please share it with those who you think will benefit from the discussion of addressing the important issues of Black parenting and education. So we have a special guest with us here today, Dr. Summer Wood. And I've known Dr. Wood for some time. We actually were in college together, Oakwood College, now University. And she worked with me on the President's Fitness Challenge there at the school, where we were engaging our students, our student body, encouraging them to stay fit. And so we've known each other for a long time, and it's been a pleasure to see her her blossom in her career. And I'm going to share a little bit of her bio with you now. So Dr. Wood has been an educator for over 10 years, having worked in both the public and private sectors. Over the course of her career, she has worked as an elementary literacy teacher, instructional coach, and educational consultant. Dr. Wood received her PhD from Vanderbilt University, where her research interests centered on critical literacy with an emphasis on reading experiences of young Black male readers. In addition, she has published multiple articles on the topic of critical literacy. In an effort to continue to be a part of the training of our future and current teaching force, she also works as an adjunct professor at Vanderbilt and Lipscomb Universities in the Nashville area. Dr. Wood is a proud graduate of Oakwood College and Johns Hopkins University. So with that, let's bring on my good friend, Dr. Summer Wood.
Hello, hello. How are you, Sydney?
I'm
Dr.
good.
Freeman. Dr. Freeman. My apologies. Yes.
No, I'm so happy that you consented to be with us today. So we were talking about at the beginning of the school year, we wanted to make sure that we talked about Black education with all this discussion about critical race theory. How can we ensure our young people know about their own history and the true history of this country, and just how to navigate this evil society? Just this week in Oregon, I had an instructor that was wearing blackface, saying that they were imitating Rosa Parks, and we're just having all these different things happening. How do we explain to our children when they see on the news those in law enforcement on horses and trying to whip Black people and all of that kind of stuff? How do we explain those things? And so I think it's so timely to have you when we talk to people about who we should have on our program, and your name came to the top. And so thank you so much for being with us and sharing your expertise here on our platform.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I think just appreciate you inviting me to talk today, as you know, think that this is a very relevant, right, timely, but essential topic for us to be thinking about and working through, especially as it relates to people who have. And right now, I'm really specifically talking about people who have young children, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But so much is bubbling up to the
Yeah.
surface that I think people thought was no longer the case in our
Yeah.
quote unquote post racial society, but we know better than that. So I think that this is just again timely, relevant, and I'm really glad to be able to talk about this.
Yeah. I do want to just interject before I turn it completely over to
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
One of the things that I've been have been trying to study up on is this concept of Saturday schools. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I learned about it through reading a article on British higher education,
Mm-hmm.
and they were really pushing this notion of reinstating Saturday schools so that Black children in the UK can better understand their history and the context in which they live there in the UK. And they were saying that they got it from the US, and I said, "Wow." So I hope that this platform is one that serves a similar purpose,
Mm-hmm.
where we're educating our audience and giving them fresh and relevant information
Yeah.
that they can take home. So,
Yeah.
without further ado, I'll
Sure.
let you go. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Sydney. Again, I'm thankful to be here. Thank you to the Liberation Movement, Dr. Freeman, for allowing me to talk with you all today. I want to be very clear about my positionality as I talk about this work today, as the topic is Black parenting and education. I am an educator, but I am not a parent, but have spent, Dr. Freeman read my bio and it mentioned, over 10 years. I'm like, man, I guess I need to update my bio because I think I'm at 15 plus now. But working with families, working with parents around this idea of education in order to help support their children in environments that are good, healthy for their children to thrive and to grow. And with that in mind, I'm framing this talk around the concept of formation, and I'm looking at it from a Christian perspective. And even if you do not subscribe to a Christian perspective, I think the analogy with which that we will use today, you will still be able to resonate with. So God, being a divine creator, could speak things into existence, right? You know, we know the creation story. In the beginning, he spoke and it was. There was no elongated process of development when it came to his creation. Yes, there was a time period, right, of 7 days, and the seventh he rested, but each time he spoke something into existence, it was. But he created us knowing that we would not be divine creators. Like we can't just speak things into existence. So generally speaking, when we are trying to get something to full maturation, there is a process involved. There is a development process. So he has put within this system that he spoke into existence this ability for things to grow and be formed over time. Okay, I think many of you can probably understand where I'm going, but it's this idea of growing and forming over time. So think about the seed. Okay, God didn't need a seed to create plants, he spoke it, but we do. So he designed something that he embedded within the plant that would allow for this continual reaping of plants for generations and generations. So the seed is a very powerful, powerful thing. The thing about seeds, though, is that they need proper conditions in order to thrive. That's essential. In order for a particular seed to grow, form, and reap its fruit, or allow you to reap its fruit, it has to have the right conditions. So think about a mango seed, right? Like, I love mango. That is one of my favorite fruit. So if I take a mango seed and I plant it in the dry, cool air of Colorado, more than likely that seed, though it was a good seed when I put it in the ground, it did not have what it needed in order to nurture it and for it to grow into a wonderful mango plant that is going to thrive and provide mangoes for many, 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 many years to come. It's not in the right soil. So the conditions and the environment matter. They do matter. And so this then made me think about the parable of the sower, right? So Jesus himself, understanding the power of a seed and soil, etc., talks about the fact that seeds go in the ground as he's thinking about spiritual formation, right? So I think about this situation of Black education and parenting in this way. It's not necessarily 100% parallel. I don't want people to go around saying that I'm saying the new interpretation of the parable of the sower is about black education, but the principles shared here are applicable and practical if we really think about it. What Christ was talking about is this seed being placed in a place where it can thrive and grow for the purposes of which we claim that it is there for, right? So schooling for me is the soil, right? The kids are the seeds. School is a place that children spend 10 out of the 12 months, okay? We know we have 12 months in a calendar year. 10 of those months, kids are in school, and they spend a minimum of 7 to 8 hours or so, not even including before care or after care if they're in any other programs. They spend 7 to 8 hours of their day at school. So on the low end, we're talking about over 1,000 hours a year in a school setting. That is the soil, right? That is the soil. Kids are the seeds. So the question, now that we're shifting, the question about Black parenting and education is, for me, the first level question is, what soil are you planting your children in? Or in what soil are you planting your children? That is essential for us to think about as it relates to educating our children. So again, we're thinking about, like, is the soil nutrient rich? Does it have the right amount of water, sunshine, all of those things that help to grow and form a nice, wonderful plant? So here's some things I need us to consider when we're specifically thinking about Black parenting and education. Number one, we have had this concept about access for opportunity, okay? So for a long time, people have been doing, especially Black people, done everything in their power to have access to some of the most elite educational institutions. Now, do not get me wrong. I am very clear on the struggle and the deeply rooted barriers, systemic barriers that have been and still are in place as it relates to barring and differentiating, separating and segregating Black people from access to some of these institutions. That is something that is undeniable. The facts clearly make it plain that that is and has been the case. And there are groups of people, there are people who have come before us, generations before us, who have sacrificed so much to be the first of something or in a particular institution to break down barriers and walls. So in this way, I am in no way disregarding that, because access is important. This battle for educational access has been going on, and it's a turbulent fight. Unfortunately, we have gained access to institutions that not only didn't have a desire to educate us. If you go back and you read some of these stories about people who were the first Black at particular institutions and what they went through when they got in the halls, it was not open arms and let me teach you, right? So one, not only was there not a desire to help us to grow academically at that point, but there definitely was no intentionality or desire to help form us into having positive Black identities. That just was not a part of it. So many Black people, for the sake of breaking down barriers, sacrificed an education that helped to build positive identity development for their educational advancement and for the sake of future generations so that they could have a choice. That's deep, right? They are going into territory that in many cases is enemy territory. And I say enemy territory because there was definitely attack. There were definitely attacks happening due to the fact that they had Black skin in a school that was designed for people with white skin, right? So you're having people make choices to bring down barriers for future generations at the risk of an environment, or at the that's not necessarily the word, but at the I will think of the word, but they are not able to have their identities developed in the same way because it's not nurtured, fostered, or cared for in that soil. That soil was not designed for them. So as I have been going through present day, my career, one thing that I've noticed is Black parents choosing PWIs, even from elementary school. We're talking even through daycare, for the purposes of receiving what they would believe is an environment that would provide their students more opportunities today, in the present, and in the future. So, oh, my child needs to go to the most elite private school. I'm going to be on the wait list from the time they are born until, because this is the it place for my child to go, right? Because these children get into the Ivies and the top art schools and all of those things, and the emphasis is on what the education can provide their child in the future and even right now, access. But then over time, I have seen parents who have made those decisions, who have sent their children to some of the most elite schools in their area, predominantly white institutions, and then they come knocking on the door of a school like mine, a historically Black institution, been around since 1909. And nope, we don't have the Olympic-sized swimming pool. We do not have the state-of-the-art, lab, or whatever the case may be, or teach Mandarin Chinese. But you would be surprised how many conversations I've had with parents who chose the access for opportunity route, and then saw the social, emotional burden that was put on their children in those environments from other students and from educators. I've had students come personally and tell me after they've transitioned to a school like mine, say, man, we had all of the things, but I was not being nurtured. The children are able to name it, right? So that makes me think, again, going back to the parable of the sower, what is the soil that you are placing your seed in? And what is it that it's going to yield, right? And I know some people may be thinking, oh, this is just a PWI bashing session. It's not. It's a question for you as parents to say, again, what soil is your seed being planted? And is it providing the type of nutrients that the seed needs in order to produce a student or a person, a human, who is strong in their Black identity, such that as they navigate this world, they are confident about who they are, and from a Christian context, whose they are. You've got to analyze the soil, because all soil is not equal for all seeds. Right? So you hear me, I'm not saying certain seeds are bad and certain seeds are good. I'm not even saying certain soils are bad at this point and certain soils are good. What I'm saying is that there needs to be a seed soil match in order for you to produce the plant that you're really trying to grow. And in this context, I am specifically thinking about the Black identity development and formation that is necessary in order to navigate this, especially this U.S. context, as you're seeing the different things come across the news screen. What soil is your child in? Are they getting access to conversations about these types of things that are happening in our society? To me, that's essential. Now, historically, Black institutions, again, we're talking about soil and schools are soil. Historically, Black institutions have been around since emancipation, right? So let's be clear. The education of Black people, that happened prior to emancipation, but once free, you saw an even stronger ramp up of the desire to educate our children. And even in that context, it wasn't just children, but the adults who were restricted, banned from being educated, right? So there has been a focus on the education of our people for generations. Little schoolhouses developing to nurture and teach the children. And there have been debates, right? We know, well, hopefully we know, if not, this is why the soil matters, right? We know about some of the educational debates that have gone on within our culture. W.E.B. Du Bois, the Talented Tenth, and Booker T. Washington, and different concepts of really what is the best way to educate our children. And then if you come on down the road to now, you have the Dr. Umar Johnsons, and those people who have just different concepts of what it means to educate our children, but the concept and the conversation of educating our children has always been one. And it's been especially important because in this U.S. society, the marginalizing of the education of Black children has always been a thing. Since the time the first Africans were brought over here, the thought of how to marginalize, restrict us from knowledge, and that's a whole nother conversation about restricting us from knowledge. Like, yeah, but restricting us from formal education is what I'll say has always been a thing. And so this has been a conversation for us for many generations. The key to this for me is that we consider the soil that we are placing our seeds in. I'm going to keep saying it because we just think, oh, let me go to the private school listings or the public school listings or the charter school listings and get the best. How is the best being determined? And is it taking into account the development of your child's Black identity? Because we know that education is holistic, mind, body, soul. So when a part of a child is intentionally or unintentionally left out, they're not getting and receiving a whole education. So let me just throw some stats out here, and I'm going to wrap some things here. The data indicates that demographic mismatches, particularly we're talking about race, in school settings between the teacher and the student can drive inequality in academic outcomes. So I want you to let that rest, right? We're talking about the fact that having a mismatch in race in this country, in the educational setting, in the school setting, can actually lead to inequality in academic outcomes. I find data like this very interesting because I believe that as Black people, we have known this for a long time. It's just now we have research and data to actually quantify and defend what we have known through our own qualitative experiences. Again, thinking about that critical race theory and how often counter narratives are not respected. So then we have to find a quantitative way of telling people that what we've been saying is actually the case. So we know that when there's a mismatch, then that leads to inequality in academic outcomes. That's already a huge thing. So we are pushing for more access to PWIs, which is fine, but our PWIs from elementary on looking at this data and then trying to diversify who is working and teaching and leading their institutions. If not, then this may not be the soil for our children because of the fact that while we think that we are putting our kids in places to have the best academic outcomes, you might be surprised to find that just the fact that there is a demographic mismatch, your child may not even be performing to the best of their abilities. We see all the data suggesting that many of the Black students who end up in some of these Ivy League schools do not end up being as successful as they could because they're dealing with the strain of racial tensions, just living their life and existing in these spaces. Again, the soil was not designed, was not created, was not developed with their seed in mind. And so now you have a seed in a soil that is not impossible to thrive, don't get me wrong, but it is much more difficult to thrive. And I believe that research can back up what I'm saying there. So, one study by Grissom, Kern, and Rodriguez indicated that Black and white children alike have significantly higher achievement when assigned a teacher of their race, right? So when there is a correspondence, there is higher achievement. Why does this matter? Well, because 9 times out of 10, white children are far more likely to have same race teachers, and they disproportionately benefit. So when we look at, let's say, the public school sector is majority at this point students of color, whereas the teaching force is significantly less. It is majority white teachers. So if we were to just look at this data, this is something that parents should be looking at, should be going to their school boards, should be going to their school principals, should be going to their school districts, etc., to state and share that we need to advocate for the fact that representation matters in the school setting, not only for social emotional health, right? But for the thing that schools care about most, achievement. Sometimes you just got to speak in the language of power. So achievement, you want to see your students achieve, then we need to adjust this soil. And so for parents, my charge to you is that we need to drop our seeds, our children, into soil that is going to help them thrive and to grow. And not just think about the fact that what we are being told is good soil, but what you can identify as good soil for your Black child. That matters. For a while, I'm not a parent, but Black parents have been dropping their seeds into rocky and thorny soil. And if we go back to that parable, we know what happens there. It gets choked out. It comes and then dies. It never begins to thrive. And then we see those evidences in our children and we wonder why. We think that it's rich soil because it's rich soil, right? They have all the things. So it may sound dramatic, but it's true. Our children's identities are being choked out. And in many cases, we aren't even seeing the heights of their true academic potential because education is holistic, but we're not thinking about the soil in a holistic way, but we want holistic outcomes. So we're, as Dr. Freeman mentioned earlier, we now can see spread across news banners. We can see what is happening in our educational system in which they're banning books like I Am Enough. Really? A book that tells you that no matter what people think about your skin color, your hair, your whatever else, that you are enough? That's a banned book. That was a banned book in Pennsylvania until a group of students decided to protest that. We are seeing the silencing of our histories in schools, which means that our children are not getting a holistic education. So it is the responsibility of parents to find soil that can help to develop them, mind, body, and spirit. Who they are truly matters. And your skin color in this country cannot be ignored. So that is a major part of who your children are. We want to try to sideline that and do the all lives matter thing. Yes, even some of our people will all lives matter this, but it is not all lives do matter, but it's important to understand that the soils that we're placing our children in do actually not educate with all lives matter in their context, which is why we echo the call that Black Lives Matter. Today, you can't see, but I have my Black educators matter, because they do. And the data shows it. Black educators matter. Black schools matter. And as Black parents, it is your responsibility to determine what soil you will place your seed in. And so today, I just want to drop that in your spirit, because, I mean, sure, I can go on and on with research, but what I really want you to walk away with is it's time to do a soil analysis of where your children are. What is the pH balance? What is the balance of light to water? What is needed in order for your seed that you brought into this world, that God has given you? What is needed in order for your child to thrive and grow? Thank you.
So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing this, your thoughts with us. What we're going to do now is quickly move to our quick commercial. I would encourage everyone to put your questions in the chat. As soon as our commercial is up, we will engage Dr. Wood in the question and answer session. And we want to remind you to please donate to the Liberation Movement. For us to have this high quality programming, to continue to do that, we need your support. So with that, we'll go to our commercial.
I am the Liberation Movement.
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 I am the Liberation Movement. My name is Dr. Sidney Freeman Jr., and I am the Executive Director and founder of the Liberation Movement, which is a 501c3 organization that works with those who are liberated and seek to be liberated psychologically, socially, and spiritually through educational initiatives. To continue to provide the high quality programming such as Saturday Soul, we need your support. Your consistent monthly investment in the movement will allow us to continue to expand on the excellent work that is already started, such as decolonizing the Black mind curriculum that is already in development. So your gifts of any size via Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal would be a blessing to the advancement of this ministry. Thank you in advance for supporting and joining the Liberation Movement.
Please remember to join Sydney, me, and our special guest today on Clubhouse at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time so we can dive deeper into today's topic. See you soon.
Dr. Wood, I want to start out with this statement, and I want you to respond. The great prophet Malcolm X said, "Only a fool would let his enemy teach their children." What's your response?
Ooh, that's a deep one. So my response to that is, I mean, I'm clear on why he said it. I mean, I've seen the evidence of it, right? Where you have people who have no concept of your history, your development, your struggle, your potential. Because I don't always want to put things in form of the deficit, right? Like, it's not just because you don't know my struggle. It's just you're not recognizing my potential. And then therefore, as a student, I am stifled. Right? So why do we continue to put our children in spaces and places in which that continues to happen over and over, and we're perpetuating that? So part of the work I do, right, is that there are some people, some of our families who do not have the option let's be honest, have access to school settings like mine, in which literally all of our teachers are Black, right? And the majority of our student population is Black. They go to their local public school. Well, then I have a different role at that point. I have a role of helping to help the teachers who are there understand where their bias is, where the work that they need to do in order to ensure that the children within their care can get the education that they need. And so while I am so clear on why Malcolm X said that, because I've seen the evidence of repeated negative encounters over and over. But then I also want to bring to the forefront this concept that everybody doesn't have that choice due to the fact that they don't have that leeway to just say, I'm going to go somewhere else. So then what about those children?
Yeah. So following up on that, when I think about the parents that do have the opportunity, so I think about let's say these middle-class parents that their training was actually in Black schools, right? And now they've become successful, but they don't send their children to Black schools. They think that the ice water at the white schools are better. Could you talk to that phenomenon?
Yeah. So that we're seeing that those of us who work in Black institutions, especially, see the evidence of that regularly, right? So conceptually, for me, it's difficult because I went to Vanderbilt, I went to Johns Hopkins, so it's not that I've never been to. I went to a predominantly white academy, so it's not that I've never been, right? But in my household, Black education mattered. Right. And we, as I mentioned in my talk, have gotten caught up in this concept, I believe, of what's flashy to the eye, right? What's the ranking in US News and World Reports? What is the facility? Now, I'm a facilities person, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying janky is okay, right? But I'm just walking you through what I see, right? So we're going through all of those concepts. Oh, where do they go to medical school? Where do they go to da 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 da? And I'm not saying none of those things are important, but what bothers me is the absence of even looking at the potential of what an HBCU or HBI can do for your child, right? It's completely skipped over because we don't have sometimes the on the surface looks this way, has these amenities, etc., and we move on. But like you said, what is so interesting to me is that these are the same people who were cultivated and trained in environments that nurtured their seed, but it's forgotten. And I think they believe that, well, I have nurtured my child enough that they don't have to have that too. And I don't personally think that's true. I mean, I think the research also suggests that that's not true. So, you know.
Yeah, I often think it's a prestige thing for the parent, right? So as much as we say we love our kids and things like that, I think there's a prestige thing when talking to other parents that you say, my child got into this school and all that kind of stuff. So we're also navigating that. Well, we have a few questions here. I want to make sure we get to them. Jessica Samuel said, thank you for your words. They have me really thinking of my youngest daughter's experience. Where could I go? She is only in the 4th grade. Where can a parent find a Black elementary school?
Good question. Now, Jessica, I don't know where you live, so I can't be very specific. But
Idaho. She's in Idaho.
Well, then that might be a little more challenging. I'm not saying it's impossible because I don't know what's out there. But you know what I've discovered recently is there is, and not everybody has these capabilities either. So, Jessica, I'm not sure that this is a possibility for you. But I do know a few families. There are actually quite a few families who have created Black co-ops for homeschooling to create educational environments that feed exactly what I was talking about, right? Like you're in context where you may not be able or have access to schools that are predominantly Black, or maybe feeding into the Black identity of your student. And so they have created co-ops for that purpose so that they can be able to teach their own children. And I understand that everybody doesn't have that ability, but this even goes back to Dr. Freeman, what you were sharing before, which is like what they had at one time, Saturday schools or cultural schools. When you think about some other cultures, Muslim culture, they have like basically cultural schools where their kids go on the weekends. Jewish culture, same thing. And I think we as Black people have to start thinking about the fact that as like someone like Jessica may not always have ready access to an institution that's going to nurture her child in that way. So what can we provide for families that may be needing this type of enrichment for their child when it's not readily accessible? So I don't have the time, but I just threw an idea out there for someone to develop.
Yeah. So as you were talking, I'm Googling African-centered online schools. And so there is a listing of African-centered schools. On the West, they're mostly in the LA area. I think there's one in like Oakland. But in the DC, the DMV, they have several African-centered schools. So I would encourage you to look at those options. But I think there needs to be this resurgence of a Sunday school 2.0 that we can supplement our young people's education, particularly in places where there's not a critical mass.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
No, it just made me think about the fact, and this is something that I've been delving into lately, is that we can't assume that because it's a Black school that it is the right soil either. Right. So no, and I say this to say, like, I know we are all growing, we are all developing in our educational goals and stuff, and that's myself included with the school that I lead. And I know that the experiences I had, I went to Oakwood Elementary and they gave me a wonderful foundation, and I went to Oakwood University, as you mentioned, that also nurtured me. But then I also critically reflect on some of those experiences and my experiences as a school leader now to say, okay, it was Black and I was supported and I was nurtured, but what did you teach me about me and about my history, right? And then what's sad is that we have a generation of people who actually were not deeply taught our history, teaching our children our history. And so like we're having to go back and do the work. I believe this is different now, but when you and I were at Oakwood, African American history was not required. That was not a required history course. U.S. history was required. World history was required. African American history was not required. And I remember years after graduation thinking to myself, how did I go to an HBCU and that was not required, right? But it's the same concept, right? So catch what I'm saying. We have developed what we believe good education is from a Eurocentric model of education. So when we develop institutions ourselves, our education platform generally is a Eurocentric platform, but it still benefits us as Black people because the people who are providing it believe in us. Right. So I went to schools that had a strong sense of belief in who Summerwood could be. And my Blackness did not deter them from telling me I was going to be great. Right. And so that was to my benefit. That was soil that I needed and I believe other people need. But I believe my challenge to us right now, and I'm thinking of the Oakwoods, the Pine Forge, especially thinking about the Christian education part of it. We have to begin to do a better job of helping our children know that our history did not begin on the plantations of the South, right? Like there were amazingly great empires in West Africa that we were taken from and brought here, so, but that's not something I learned in school, is that I'm teaching that now to my high schoolers, but that's just not something we learned even in Black schools, I think, because we were using a model that was created not for us, but it was created and then we adopted.
So what's running through my mind is that we have to decolonize the Adventists. So now I'm talking denominationally. We have to decolonize our Adventist curriculum. So one of the things that's one thing that is pretty challenging when we think about our alma mater, Oakwood, and something that is a new thing that I want to really push is that there was a student at Andrews University that started a African American Studies minor at Andrews, and if you look at the curriculum at Oakwood now, if you go into their bulletin, there is still not a minor in African American Studies in 2021. That needs to change, and so I may need to challenge some of us alumni from that institution to figure out a way to address that. But that's something that's going to be really important. We got a lot of questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to them. So Ronnie Vanderhorst said, great substance. Dr. Wood, staying in the soil seed growth concept, what are a few things that students need pruning coming from PWI schools into primary and secondary HBCU schools?
Oh man, I think one of the biggest thing that needs to be pruned is the concept of I can't, right? Like, I think for so long there has been this threat that you cannot achieve something or you won't be able to achieve something. And when you get into soil where you really can, I think that I've seen it be an impediment. Like, it's impeding them from growing because they've constantly been questioning themselves when they're in these no, they are not majority. When they are in these PWIs, right? So that's one thing. Secondly, is the concept that they have to prune off the concept that their voice doesn't matter and understand that their voice does matter. So you'll see students who may be hesitant to speak in classroom settings and discussions, etc., because there's this concept that they're not used to just being judged by what is being said. It's who they are first and then what's being said. So you're the Black girl that said, instead of you're the person who thought this, right? Which puts a different layer on it, which can be difficult. And being willing to use that voice is something that is super important. I tell this story from time to time because I think I feel like it's relevant and needs for people who think that this only applies to people who are struggling or something. But I went to Vanderbilt University, which is a predominantly white institution, for my doctorate, super high ranked in education. Okay. Now I finished my doctorate, did my dissertation defense. You are very clear on the process. Generally speaking, there are revisions, okay? You defend, there's revisions, you make the revisions, you're done. I'd been there for 5 years. Everyone I knew had gone through that process. And so when it was time for me to defend, I defended. You wait out for them to tell you whether or not you passed. And then they tell you what you need to do. And my advisor and I had already planned a meeting time after the defense, just in case. I mean, not just in case, because it's going to happen. Well, when it was all done, they said, no revisions. And we just want you to write a memo to teachers. Now, from anyone else, this would be like, yay, a joyous moment. Mm-hmm. For me, I was happy because I didn't want to have to do more work, but I was hesitant. And then the questions began to percolate in my mind. Like, was it really that bad? Like, it was almost the opposite, right? Like, everyone else I know who's way smarter than me had to do revisions. Why don't I have to do revisions? Was it not good enough and they don't even feel like going through the process and they're just passing me? Like, all kinds of things like that. And I loved the people on my committee. Don't get me wrong. But it's being in a setting in which you have some reservations that you almost cannot erase, right? And you may not even realize you have until you get into moments like that, because you begin to question whether or not yours was really that good, right? And so that's hard. I mean, that's hard to deal with. And that's not something I ever dealt with in my mindset when I was in predominantly Black institutions. And if you were to interview me before that, I never would have said I would question, my ability to do work, etc. But those things bubble up, and that's the hard part. That's the pruning that we have to do. It's that mindset stuff that you don't even realize is there.
To that point, I remember being at Auburn, and I sat in on a Black gentleman's defense, and I was mortified in the sense that, for instance, he really could not articulate his methodological approach, right? But they passed him. And so what it made me, it finally clicked, because I'm not a K-12 person, I'm a higher ed person, but I'm seeing the pipeline, right? I'm seeing this was an example at the higher education level, the graduate level, of what happens in high school, where they're just trying to get the numbers so they can say, oh, we're educating Black people, and so particularly a Black male, right? To see him get pushed through, it doesn't help the culture. It doesn't help our people if he's not tight, right? If his stuff isn't there. So it's not just an elementary school or high school thing.
Yeah.
It's also, you'll see it in the college environment.
Yeah. High expectations.
Yeah, so Gerald Anderson asked this question: how do we build a rock solid, convincing, practical argument to convince Black parents to support organizations like yours?
Okay, I can just tell you what my approach has been, and I don't know if it's perfect or right. What you produce matters, right? Like, I used to at some point, well, actually, no, that's not true. Parents, when I first started in my institution, we were struggling. It was like we're a turnaround situation. Many of our institutions have been through that, right? But one thing I was intentional about was I was not going to try to convince anyone to come to my school. You need to make that decision. What I did was lay out what I was offering. What we have to do as Black institutions is actually be excellent. You actually have to have excellence, and you actually have to have products, children, families that represent what you do. Once you begin to have that, they do the work for you. And truthfully, I don't go out recruiting. My school has gone from 20 something to almost 100 kids, right? Within the span of the last 7 years. And I don't do much going around recruiting. We do programs, sure, but I let the students be the evidence of what we do. I let the families tell their coworkers, you don't know about this school? You need to go over there on Young's Lane, right? So I believe that sometimes we spend too much time trying to do the marketing piece and creating a tight package, and we don't have substance behind it. Enough substance, let me say.
Right.
So we have to be committed to excellence. We have schools with great potential, but we are not spending our time ensuring that our programs are tight and that we are actually maximizing what we have with very little resources. My school, when I first started, we were literally cutting paper into 8.5 by 11 to fit into the copier, picking up pennies off, and these are not exaggerations, picking up pennies off of the floor, okay, and putting it in the bank. We wasted no money. All right. We were on the verge of closing. To today, we're in the middle of a major locker room renovation that is thousands of dollars. To God be the glory, right? But what happened was people began to see what we were doing. Money started to come in. Students started to come in. Others began to promote what we were doing. And so I believe, my strongest belief is that the most practical way to help people understand that they need to support this is to to operate in excellence and to have a product that is convincing. I can have a conversation with anybody right now and in 5 minutes name off a bunch of stuff that we are actually doing. Like if you were to walk in, we are actually doing that could convince someone who is a young up and coming professional to say, I think I should give my money to this school. Right? We just got to actually be able to tell our story and stop letting other people tell your story. Stop letting the person who went to your school 30 years ago, telling the story about what happened 30 years ago, tell your story. That's your fault. You need to be able to tell people what you are doing, and you need to be able to put that out there for people to see.
So we're in our last 5 minutes, and I want to encourage everyone that's on here that has access to Clubhouse to jump on Clubhouse with us as soon as we finish this broadcast, so we can further this discussion. Summer, we're going to before we leave, we want you to tell us ways in which we can support what you're doing. I know that you have a heavy social media presence and a consultation business. So we want to make sure we plug that. But we have one other question before you do that. This is from Chris White. I work at a public high school PWI, but there are a small number of Black students. How can I best support them? How do I support Black students who aren't ready to be supported as Black students?
So I think I wonder what you mean by aren't ready to be supported as Black students, because I think that all Black students are ready to be supported as Black students. They may not be cognizant and talking about it verbally, but there are key things that need to happen. Number one, they need to be valued and their voice is valued. Again, I'm not walking up to you and saying, I value your voice, right? But you're showing intentionality around the fact that who they are matters in this space. You are, when we're looking at schools, you are looking at the data in a stratified way to see, where are these students being placed in classes? Are there any trends? Like, this is stuff that they don't even have to see and know, but as a school, you are supporting them by ensuring that they are not falling into any of these gaps that we know occur in predominantly white institutions, but are perpetuated because we don't look at data and we don't look at the information in that way to find the trends. So those are some of the behind the scenes things to do. And then really the next basic step after that is to begin to really build authentic relationships, hear from them, talk to them, see where their minds are as it relates to their Black identity, right? Without the judgment of saying, if I don't know the context, but oh, you're not really Black. Do you know how many times these kids have probably heard that in a predominantly white institution? Oh, you're not really Black, or you're different than other Black people, right? And they may have been absorbing this their whole life. We got to think about how to help them deal with that in a way that helps them understand that it's not actually a negative thing to be Black, right? But before you don't want to just pounce on them and like, I'm gonna help you be more Black. You really need to build relationships, right? To see where they are, where their mindsets are, talk to them about things, suggest books when you hear certain things come up as they're discussing it, as they're talking about it, and then have conversations with them privately to say, tell me, literally, just tell me, what is it like to be Black at this school? Whatever you say, I'm listening, right? You've got to listen. You've got to allow them to speak. You've got to build the relationships. You got to hear what they're saying and what's underlying. And then you got to look at the data in your school and the trends to see if there are things that are disproportionately affecting them as opposed to other students.
Thank you so much, Summer, for your time. Could you, Dr. Wood, would you please tell us how to get in contact with you, to support the work you're doing, even support your school? Tell us the way to.
Yes, there are a few ways. One, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm pretty active on there, and I talk a lot about this type of work on that platform. at lit, L-I-T _doc. That's how you find me there. On Facebook, it's Strategic Advantage. So advantage, but not AD, but ED. Strategic Advantage, and you can find me there. And I just like to have discussions and talk about and post about, things like this that we're talking about today, education of our students. My school is F.H. Jenkins Preparatory School. We are located in Nashville, Tennessee. You can find us at fhjenkins.net. Feel free to support us. I promise you, excellent education is going on. And if you're looking for a school to support that is nurturing young Black children, this is the school. We are doing amazing things. I'm so proud of our staff and our faculty. And like I said, we are doing much with little, right? Like whatever we have, we are committed to the excellence of providing education that is quality for our students. So please support us. You can find us, like I said, at fhjenkins.net. And we would love if you're in Nashville to give us a call and come visit us. You will have to get COVID tested. We are in the middle of a pandemic, but you can come visit us and see what's going on in our school.
All right. Thank you so much, Summer. We're going to jump on Clubhouse in a few moments, but thank you to all who have engaged with us. And we're going to close out. Thank you again.